For 8 years of marriage, she was the perfect wife he always wanted, preparing impeccable dinners while he arrived late with elaborate excuses about meetings that never happened, smiling for friends and family while he built an empire of lies so complex that he himself believed he was too smart and discreet to be caught. And seemingly had no idea that her husband, Raphael, maintained a double life, complete with another woman and 2 children in a neighboring city, that half the money he claimed to be investing in businesses was actually supporting his secret family, and that every monthly business trip was, in fact, a domestic weekend with a woman who believed she was his only legitimate wife. But here's what Raphael never imagined in his worst nightmares. Mariana knew absolutely everything for 5 whole years, ever since the day she found a second wallet forgotten in a suit jacket pocket, with photos of children who were not hers and credit cards in a name she didn't recognize. Instead of confronting him or divorcing immediately, she did something far more calculated and devastating. Mariana hired a private investigator who documented every lie, every suspicious financial transaction, every moment of Raphael's double life with forensic precision, while simultaneously building her own secret financial empire, strategically moving money and creating businesses in her own name that Raphael didn't even know existed because he was too busy managing his own lies to pay attention to what his wife was doing. And now, after 5 years of meticulous preparation and irrefutable documentation, Mariana is about to completely destroy Raphael's life in ways he cannot predict, not through an emotional confrontation, but through a legal and financial execution so precise that by the time he finally realizes what is happening, it will be too late to save anything. This is a story of revenge served not hot but ice cold after years of patient planning, of a woman who turned betrayal into fuel to build a fortress around herself while her husband thought he was controlling the narrative. And you need to stick around until the end to find out exactly how Mariana will dismantle Raphael's life piece by piece, whether he deserves the mercy she likely won't give, and what happens when a man who thought he was a master manipulator discovers he was being manipulated by someone infinitely smarter and more patient the entire time. The story begins on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in the impeccable home of Mariana and Rafael Santos, located in an upscale gated community. The sun streams through expensive curtains, illuminating a modern kitchen where Mariana is preparing an elaborate breakfast that Rafael will barely notice because he's glued to his phone, answering urgent messages that she knows are not about work, but about coordinating the logistics of his double life. Mariana has a perfectly choreographed morning routine developed over 8 years of marriage. She wakes up at 6 a.m., does yoga for 30 minutes in the room they converted into a home studio, takes a long shower where she plans the day while the hot water washes away the tension of pretending not to know her husband is a serial liar, and then goes downstairs to prepare a breakfast that includes scrambled eggs the way Raphael likes them, hand-poured coffee with beans he insists are the only acceptable ones, and fruit cut into decorative shapes because Mariana learned years ago that attention to detail is what keeps men comfortable and unsuspecting. Raphael finally appears at 7:15, exactly as he always does. Already dressed in an impeccable suit that cost 3,000 rays, hair styled with imported product, exuding expensive cologne that Mariana buys for him on birthdays and Christmases, without mentioning that she has already seen receipts for the same cologne being purchased on a credit card he thinks she doesn't know exists. He kisses the top of her head distractedly, an automatic gesture of affection without real meaning, and sits down at the table, picking up his tablet to read financial news while he eats. He doesn't ask how she slept or what she plans to do today, because he genuinely doesn't care, as long as dinner is ready when he returns and the house is spotless and she is available for the role of wife when he needs her. Mariana watches Raphael eat while pretending to read a home decor magazine, but in reality she is studying his body language, looking for signs that something has changed in his double life. She has become an expert at reading his micro-expressions and tells in the 5 years since she discovered the truth. She knows when he is worried about the other family versus worried about real work, knows when he is planning a weekend away versus genuinely has a business trip. She can differentiate lies from truth better than a professional lie detector because she has a mental catalog of years of dedicated observation. Today, Raphael seems slightly more tense than usual. There is a line between his eyebrows that appears when he is stressed, and Mariana wonders if something is happening with the other family he maintains just 40 minutes away in the neighboring city of Campinas while they live in São Paulo. She discovered years ago through the investigator that Raphael divides his time almost equally between the two homes. Monday and Tuesday here with her, Wednesday and Thursday in Campinas with the other woman named Julia and 2 small children, Friday alternating depending on which family has an important event, and weekends equally divided in a rotation he manages through a coded calendar on a phone he thinks is indecipherably discreet. Raphael finishes breakfast quickly, as he always does. He says he has an important meeting at 8:30, so he needs to leave soon, kisses Mariana again mechanically, and is heading out when she calls after him. Raphael, do you remember we have dinner with the Ferreiras tonight, right? It's their wedding anniversary. I confirmed we're going last week. Raphael pauses, visibly irritated by a social obligation he has clearly completely forgotten. Oh, yes, of course. I'll be here by 7 so we can get ready. Don't worry. Mariana smiles sweetly, knowing he will likely try to cancel last minute by fabricating a work emergency, because she secretly checks his calendar and knows he promised to be in Campinas tonight for the dance recital of the 5-year-old daughter he has with Julia. It will be interesting to see which commitment he prioritizes and what lie he invents to justify his absence from one or the other place. After Raphael leaves in the silver Mercedes he bought last year, saying he needed a better car to impress clients, when in reality he needed a second car because Julia was complaining about using an older vehicle while the first wife had a new one, Mariana finally relaxes the mask of the content, perfect wife she maintains whenever he is present. She methodically clears the breakfast, puts the dishes in the imported washing machine that cost a fortune, cleans the countertops until they shine, and then goes to the small office on the 2nd floor that she has converted into the command center for the operation Raphael has no idea exists. The office looks innocent at first glance. There is a nice desk she theoretically uses to plan the charity events she organizes and manage domestic finances. There is a bookshelf with cookbooks, decor guides, and light romances, but a locked bottom drawer contains something very different. 5 years of meticulous documentation of every lie Raphael has told, every suspicious financial transaction, all the proof of bigamy, which is a crime in Brazil punishable by 2 to 6 years in prison, and a detailed plan of exactly how Mariana will use all of it to destroy his life when the timing is perfect. Mariana opens the drawer with a key she keeps on a chain around her neck, hidden under her clothes. She takes out organized folders and opens a laptop that is encrypted with a password only she knows, and spends the next 2 hours reviewing the latest updates from the private investigator she hired 5 years ago, a discreet man named Paulo who costs a fortune, but who has documented literally Raphael's every move since then. This week's updates include photos of Raphael at the supermarket with Julia and the children buying groceries on Sunday while he was theoretically on a business trip in Brasilia. Audio recordings of a phone conversation where he tells Julia he loves her and can't wait to return to her house as if that were the only real home, while this one where Mariana lives is just an obligation he maintains for reasons Julia apparently doesn't question too deeply, and documentation of a 60,000 reais transfer from the joint account Raphael has with Mariana to a separate account he uses exclusively for Campinas expenses. Mariana takes meticulous notes, as she always does. She is building a legal and financial case so tight that when she finally confronts Raphael through lawyers instead of personally, he will have no possible defense. Bigamy is a clear crime. Diversion of marital funds to support a secret family is absolutely documented, and she has enough evidence to ensure she will get everything in the divorce, including the house, cars, investments, and the company Raphael proudly built, without knowing that Mariana has slowly transferred 49% of the shares to a holding company in her name through legal manipulations her lawyer structured over the years. But Mariana is not ready to execute the plan yet. The final pieces are missing. She wants to ensure that not only does Raphael lose everything, but that he understands exactly how long she knew and how completely he was fooled while he thought he was fooling her. She wants the humiliation to be public and total for friends, family, and business associates to know exactly what kind of man he is, and most importantly, she wants the perfect timing where the revelation causes the maximum possible damage, not just financial, but emotional and social. Mariana spends the rest of the morning working on her own business, which she secretly launched 3 years ago using money she strategically diverted from accounts Raphael neglected to monitor because he thought his wife didn't understand complex finances. She created a corporate event consulting company that now generates 40,000 reais in monthly revenue completely independently of anything Raphael provides. The money goes into an account at a different bank under her maiden name, which he doesn't know she still keeps active. She is slowly building her own empire that will ensure that when everything collapses, she will not only survive, but thrive, while he begs for mercy that she learned through years of his betrayal not to give easily. At noon, Mariana closes the laptop and puts the folders back in the locked drawer. She transforms back into the perfect wife the neighbors know. She goes to the condo gym where she does personal training, has a light salad she prepared at home, and spends the afternoon visiting an expensive florist to choose arrangements for the charity dinner she is organizing next week, an event Raphael will attend to maintain appearances of a dedicated husband, while probably secretly messaging Julia, complaining about the tedious social obligations with his first family. In the afternoon, Mariana receives a message as she expected, Raphael saying the meeting ran long and he will be late, that he should arrive by 7:30, but they can still go to the Ferreira's dinner if she doesn't mind arriving a little late. She replies with a heart emoji and an understanding message saying it's fine, and she will be ready when he arrives, but she knows he is not in an extended meeting. She checked the GPS of his car, which she secretly accesses through a security app she convinced him to install years ago, saying it was for protection in case the car was stolen. The GPS shows he is parked in front of a dance school in Campinas, waiting for his daughter with Julia to finish class, so he can attend her recital before rushing back to São Paulo to fulfill the obligation of attending dinner with his first wife. Mariana wonders how many times he has done this kind of logistical juggling over the years. Running between two lives, keeping elaborate stories separate, never slipping enough to fully expose himself, although there have been close calls he doesn't know she witnessed through Paulo's surveillance, and she feels a mix of admiration for the elaborate dedication it takes to maintain a charade of this magnitude and repulsion for a man who chose to build an empire of lies instead of simply being honest or choosing one life over the other. Before we continue and discover exactly how Mariana found out the truth about Raphael's double life 5 years ago, and what led her to choose calculated revenge instead of immediate confrontation, we want to hear from you who are following us. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, which city or country, because we love knowing that our stories reach people everywhere, and if you have ever suspected or discovered that someone close to you was systematically lying to you, share how you reacted, because every story in the comments creates a community of people who understand the complexity of relationships based on deception. If you are feeling something for Mariana's impossible situation and curiosity about Raphael's dirty secret, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel, turning on notifications so you don't miss any part of this story of betrayal, calculated revenge, and justice served cold after years of patient planning. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10, to let us know if it resonated with you. Now let's continue, because Mariana's discovery 5 years ago will reveal layers of deception that are even more shocking than you imagine. To fully understand why Mariana chose strategic patience instead of immediate confrontation, we need to go back 5 years to a Thursday afternoon in March, when everything irreversibly changed. This was a time when Mariana was 27 years old and had been married to Raphael for only 3 years. She was still relatively new and naive, believing their marriage was solid even if it wasn't particularly passionate or deeply connected. She attributed Raphael's emotional distance to a naturally reserved personality and an intense focus on building his company, never for a second suspecting there was a far more sinister explanation for his regular absences and divided attention. On that specific day, Mariana was organizing Raphael's closet, preparing suits to go to the luxury dry cleaner they used because Raphael insisted expensive clothes deserved professional care. She was checking the pockets before packaging them, as she always did, because Raphael had the irritating habit of leaving forgotten receipts, pens, and sometimes cash. In the inner pocket of a gray suit jacket he had worn the previous week, she felt a bulk she wasn't expecting. A leather wallet that wasn't the one he usually carried. Mariana initially thought it was an old wallet he had left in rotation, or perhaps a separate work wallet for corporate cards. But when she opened it out of a curiosity that would become the most important decision of her life, she found something completely unexpected and devastating. Inside was Raphael's ID with an address she didn't recognize in Campinas, a credit card in his full name but a number she had never seen, photos of 2 small children she definitely didn't know posing with Raphael in casual, domestic settings, and a photo of him with a beautiful brunette woman and the same 2 children, all smiling in what appeared to be an amusement park. The photo had a date printed on it from just 3 weeks prior, when Raphael was theoretically on a business trip in Rio de Janeiro. Mariana sat heavily on the bed, holding the wallet with hands that began to tremble uncontrollably, her brain trying to process the implications of what she was seeing, but refusing to accept the obvious conclusion because it was simply too impossible. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the children were nieces and nephews he never mentioned. Maybe the woman was a cousin or a family friend. But then why would he have a second wallet with a different address? And why had he never once mentioned these people who were apparently close enough to take family photos? Mariana spent the next 4 hours in a state of partial shock. She photographed every item in the wallet with her phone camera, put everything back exactly as she found it, and returned the wallet to the same pocket where she discovered it. She then sat in the empty living room, trying to decide what to do with the information that had just completely exploded her understanding of who Raphael was and what their marriage meant. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately when he returned from work, throwing the wallet in his face and demanding an explanation. But a small, calculating voice in the back of her mind that she didn't know she possessed whispered that a premature confrontation would be a strategic mistake, that if there was a secret of this magnitude, there was probably much more she didn't know, and acting impulsively would give Raphael a chance to hide evidence, fabricate excuses, or potentially manipulate the situation so that she ended up looking crazy or paranoid. So Mariana did something that surprised even herself. She decided not to say anything immediately, but to investigate silently first, to gather the complete facts before making any move that would reveal she knew something was wrong. It was a decision that would prove defining not just for the next few days, but for the next 5 entire years of her life. Mariana began her own investigation methodically and carefully. She hired a discreet private investigator through a recommendation from a lawyer friend who kept the recommendation confidential. She gave Paolo, the investigator, all the information from the secret wallet and asked him to find out everything he could about the parallel life Raphael was apparently maintaining. It took Paolo only 1 week to return with a report that confirmed Mariana's worst fears and, in fact, revealed that the situation was even more extensive and deliberate than she had imagined. Raphael was not just having a discreet affair or maintaining a relationship on the side. He was living a complete, elaborately coordinated double life that likely required an organization that would be impressive if it weren't morally repugnant. Paolo presented the report in a thick envelope that Mariana opened with trembling fingers at a discreet cafe far from her neighborhood. Raphael had been legally married to her, Mariana, for 5 years, but 2 years before that wedding, he had established a relationship with a woman named Julia Cardoso, who worked in the marketing department of a corporate client his company served. The relationship evolved rapidly, and within 6 months, Julia was pregnant. Raphael did not break up with her, as a normal single man would do upon meeting Mariana and falling in love. Instead, he continued both relationships simultaneously, keeping Julia convinced that she was his primary girlfriend and eventually life partner, while courting Mariana separately. When Julia had their first child, a boy named Pedro, Raphael was present at the birth and signed the certificate as the father. He bought an apartment for Julia in Campinas, where she moved, thinking it was temporary until they made the relationship official, but which became a permanent arrangement. Raphael visited regularly 3 to 4 times a week, maintaining a paternal presence and presenting himself to Julia's neighbors and friends as her committed husband, though never officially marrying. Simultaneously, Raphael pursued his relationship with Mariana, whom he met through mutual friends. Their relationship was more traditional and socially visible. He introduced Mariana to his family and friends, proposed an elaborate marriage after 8 months of dating, and they had a formal wedding with 200 guests that cost a fortune, which Mariana now realized was partially financed by money that should have been supporting Julia and her small child. After marrying Mariana, Raphael continued his life with Julia without interruption. In fact, Julia became pregnant with their second child, a girl named Sophia, born a year after Raphael's wedding to Mariana. So, during the first year of his official marriage, he was not only maintaining a parallel relationship, but creating a second child with another woman who believed she was his main partner. The documentation Paolo provided was extensive and irrefutable. Photos of Raphael entering and leaving Julia's apartment at consistent times multiple times a week, audio recordings of phone conversations where he told Julia he loved her and planned a future together, eventually making it official when the timing was right, though the timing apparently never came, and financial records showing that Raphael paid the rent for Julia's apartment, all her expenses, and child support, essentially maintaining a complete parallel household that cost approximately as much as the life he maintained with Mariana. Paolo also discovered that Julia knew Raphael had a legal wife, whom he described as a marriage of convenience for family and business reasons that he would eventually end. So, Julia was not exactly an innocent victim, but a willing participant in a relationship where she had to share her man with another woman. Mariana read the entire report 3 times, feeling emotions move from shock to rage, to something colder and more calculating. She realized she had 3 basic options: confront Raphael immediately and file for divorce based on infidelity and deceit, which would give her a legal advantage but reveal her hand prematurely, or accept the situation and continue the marriage knowing the truth but never addressing it, in the pathetic hope that he would eventually choose her over Julia, or do something completely different that the strategic voice in her head was whispering as a possibility. Use the knowledge as a secret weapon, gather more evidence, and position herself financially and legally to ensure that when she eventually revealed she knew and filed for divorce, she would utterly destroy Raphael, leaving him with nothing while she walked away with everything. The third option was risky and required patience and acting skills Mariana wasn't sure she possessed. It would mean continuing to live a lie, performing as the ignorant wife while secretly building a case against him. It would mean possibly years of feigning affection and normality while methodically documenting every lie, every financial transaction, every moment of his double life, thinking he was too smart to be caught. But it would also mean that when she finally acted, she would have absolute power to dictate the terms and ensure that justice was served not just through divorce, but through a public exposure that would destroy the reputation Raphael had carefully built as a respectable businessman and family man. Mariana decided at that cafe, while holding the devastating report, that she would choose slow, strategic revenge instead of the immediate emotional satisfaction of confrontation. She would spend the next few years building a fortress around herself, becoming financially independent, documenting every crime of bigamy and financial fraud Raphael committed, thinking he was too clever to be caught. And then, when the timing was perfect, she would reveal everything at once, destroying his life as completely as he had destroyed her trust and her years. This decision, made 5 years ago in a discreet cafe, is the reason Mariana today lives a double life of her own. The perfect wife, superficially, but a calculating strategist underneath. And Raphael remains completely unaware that every lie he tells and every day that passes is adding more ammunition to the inevitable destruction Mariana is orchestrating with a patience he never imagined she possessed. The 5 years between Mariana's discovery and the present day were simultaneously the most difficult and transformative of her life. Each day required a performance worthy of a professional actress, where she woke up next to a man she increasingly despised but treated with convincing affection, prepared meals for a husband who systematically lied about his whereabouts, but she smiled while serving the food, and attended social events by his side where friends and family praised their relationship while she bit her tongue against the urge to scream that it was all an elaborate facade. But parallel to the performance of the devoted wife, Mariana was building her own empire and gathering an arsenal of evidence that would eventually destroy Raphael completely. She woke up at 5 in the morning before him to work on her encrypted laptop, running the consulting business that grew from a small operation to a respectable firm, generating 40,000 reais monthly. Money she diverted to a secret account that grew over the years to hold savings of over 500,000 reais, completely separate from any assets Raphael knew existed. Mariana also obsessively educated herself on family law, corporate law, financial planning, and divorce strategy. She consumed books and articles and anonymously consulted different lawyers, obtaining multiple opinions on the best way to structure her eventual exit to maximize her gains and minimize Raphael's options. She learned about bigamy being a crime that could result in 2 to 6 years in prison, about how to prove the dissipation of marital assets, where Raphael used shared money for the benefit of third parties instead of his legal family, and about how to subtly transfer asset ownership over time so that when the divorce was filed, she would already legally possess more than it seemed on the surface. A particularly brilliant move Mariana executed 2 years after the discovery was convincing Raphael that they should restructure his company for tax optimization purposes. She brought in a corporate lawyer whom she had secretly consulted extensively and who structured the company so that Mariana technically owned 49% through a holding company in her maiden name. The transaction was presented as a completely legitimate asset protection and tax reduction strategy, which Raphael signed without carefully reading the details because he trusted that his wife was helping their financial situation, without realizing he was handing over half the company he built to the woman who was secretly planning to destroy him. During these 5 years, Mariana also kept investigator Paulo on retainer, paying him monthly to continue documenting Raphael's double life. The weekly reports detailed every visit to Campinas, every lie Raphael told about work or travel when he was actually with his second family, every loving text message he exchanged with Julia that Paulo intercepted through technological methods Mariana preferred not to know the details of, and every purchase Raphael made for his children with Julia using credit cards financed by joint accounts. The accumulation of evidence became so extensive that Mariana had literally dozens of folders organized chronologically, documenting 5 years of systematic deceit. Mariana also began building a support network of people who would know the truth when she eventually revealed it. She told 2 close friends and the top divorce lawyer she formerly retained, who was silently preparing the papers. She wanted to ensure that when she finally acted, she would have immediate emotional and legal support because she knew Raphael would not go quietly and that there would be a war requiring strategically positioned allies. The most difficult aspect of 5 years of performance was not actually feigning affection or keeping the secret. It was dealing with the moments where she almost slipped and revealed she knew. There was an afternoon when Raphael returned from a business trip and described a meeting he theoretically had with a client in Porto Alegre, but Mariana had seen through GPS that he was in Campinas and through Paulo's photos that he was actually at the 4th birthday party of Sofia, his daughter with Julia. She had to physically bite her tongue not to correct his story and simply nod and ask about the hotel where he supposedly stayed, inventing details that never existed. There was also a terrible moment when Raphael's mother visited and casually mentioned it would be good if Raphael and Mariana had children soon because she wanted more grandchildren, and Mariana had to smile and agree while thinking that her mother-in-law already had 2 grandchildren from Raphael that she didn't know existed, and that Mariana had deliberately avoided getting pregnant because the last thing she wanted was to be permanently linked through a child to a man she despised. The decision not to have children with Raphael was strategic and painful. Mariana wanted to be a mother eventually, but recognized that having a child would complicate the divorce and create a permanent connection with the man she planned to completely cut out of her life. So she secretly continued taking birth control pills while Raphael assumed they were casually trying without pressure. Yet another lie in the foundation of lies their marriage had become. For 5 years, Mariana also observed the evolution of Raphael's parallel life. Through Paulo's reports, she saw his children with Julia grow from babies to small children who called Raphael Daddy and clearly loved him genuinely, with no idea that he maintained a completely separate family in a neighboring city. She saw Julia age prematurely under the stress of being essentially a single mother who only saw her partner on alternating days of the week. And there were moments where Mariana felt a moral complication about what the eventual revelation would do not only to Raphael, but to these other innocent victims who did not ask to be part of his web of lies. But then Mariana remembered the years of her life that were wasted in a lie, the humiliation of smiling for friends while her husband was simultaneously creating another family, the fundamental betrayal of a man who looked her in the eye every morning and consciously chose to continue the elaborate deceit, and the compassion for Julia and the children evaporated, replaced by the determination that everyone involved deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful the revelation would be. There was also an evolution in Mariana's perception of herself during these 5 years. When she initially discovered the truth, she felt like a pathetic victim who had been fooled for years without noticing obvious signs. But as she executed her strategy and built financial independence and gathered devastating evidence, she transformed into something completely different. She became a cold, calculating strategist who was probably smarter and certainly more patient than Raphael would ever be. She discovered she had a capacity for long-term planning and meticulous execution that she had never shown before because she never needed to. Adversity and betrayal forged a version of her that was stronger and more dangerous than anyone, including herself, would have imagined. Mariana also became an expert observer of human behavior. She could read micro-expressions and body language not just of Raphael, but of anyone around her. She developed a 6th sense for lie detection that made her almost impossible to deceive about anything. And the cruel irony was that the better she became at detecting Raphael's deception, the easier it became to maintain her own deception of the ignorant, contented wife. because she understood exactly which behaviors would sell her performance. During the 5 years, there were also strange moments of almost affection or at least complicated recognition between Mariana and Rafael. There were nights when they watched movies together and genuinely laughed at jokes, dinners where they talked about news or gossip about mutual acquaintances, and the connection seemed real for a few minutes. In those moments, Mariana wondered if a part of Rafael genuinely appreciated life with her, even while maintaining a parallel life, if he was capable of such complete compartmentalization that he truly enjoyed both relationships separately without significant internal conflict, and that made her hate him even more because it suggested that betrayal was not even difficult for him, but as natural as breathing. Mariana also had to navigate her own temptations during the 5 years. There was a man she met at a business conference who was clearly interested and whom she found attractive, and for a moment, she considered having her own affair as a form of revenge, or at least to find the real connection missing in her marriage. But she decided against it because she wanted to maintain an absolute moral advantage when she eventually confronted Rafael. She didn't want to give him an opening to allege that she had also cheated or that the marriage had failed for mutual reasons. She wanted it to be crystal clear that she was the perfect, faithful wife who did everything right, while he systematically destroyed their vows and trust through elaborate lies. So Mariana remained emotionally, if not technically physically, celibate for 5 years, fulfilling conjugal obligations when Rafael initiated, but without enthusiasm or genuine connection, just another performance in the growing pile of performances that constituted her existence. The turning point where Mariana decided she was finally ready to execute the plan comes 5 years after the initial discovery. She is now 32 years old, has built a respectable business and substantial savings, gathered evidence so extensive that no judge could ignore it, positioned herself legally to own half of significant assets, and, most importantly, developed the emotional strength and confidence to face the war she knows will come when she reveals she knew everything for 5 whole years. The decision to act now versus waiting longer is precipitated by several factors. First, Mariana discovers through Paulo's report that Rafael is considering having a 3rd child with Julia, who is pushing for more commitment and possibly threatening to leave him if he doesn't officialize their relationship soon. Second, Mariana is offered a significant business opportunity that requires her to temporarily move abroad for 6 months, and she wants to resolve Rafael's situation before embarking on a new chapter of her life. And third, frankly, she is exhausted from the performance and ready to live authentically again, even if the beginning is through an explosion that will vaporize the world she knows. So Mariana schedules a meeting with the divorce lawyer Dr. Patricia Alves, whom she retained 3 years ago. The two women meet in a discreet office in a commercial district far from anywhere Rafael frequents. And Mariana places 5 years of documentation on the table between them, 12 thick folders containing thousands of pages of photographic evidence, audio transcripts, financial records, witness statements including Julia's neighbors who would identify Rafael in court if necessary, and a signed confession from investigator Paulo detailing his methods and confirming the authenticity of everything he gathered. Dr. Patricia flips through the material with progressively raised eyebrows. She has worked with complicated divorces for 20 years, but has rarely seen a case so meticulously documented or so devastating for the guilty party. She looks at Mariana with a mixture of professional admiration and slight awe. Mariana, this is more than enough to ensure you receive everything in the divorce and that Rafael likely faces criminal charges for bigamy if you choose to press them. The question is how aggressively you want to proceed and how much collateral damage you are willing to accept, because when this goes public, it will completely blow up his life. Mariana responds without hesitation, her voice calm but with steel underneath. I want to proceed with maximum aggression. I want him to lose everything he built. I want him to face criminal charges if possible. I want friends, family, and business associates to know exactly what kind of man he is, and I want him to understand that I knew for 5 whole years and was building this while he thought he was too smart to be caught. As for collateral damage to Julia and the children, I feel for them, but I am not responsible for Raphael's choices, and they deserve to know the truth as much as I deserve to. Dr. Patricia nods, approving the approach. Then let's start preparing the most detailed and brutal divorce petition I've ever written. We'll attach a representation of the evidence we have, but save the majority for discovery because it will devastate him when he realizes the extent of the documentation. We will simultaneously file a criminal complaint with the prosecutor's office regarding bigamy because it's a separate crime he needs to answer for. And we will do all of this in a coordinated manner so that he is caught completely off guard, with no chance to hide assets or fabricate a defensive narrative. The two women spend the next 3 hours planning every aspect of the legal campaign that will destroy Raphael, and when Mariana finally leaves Patricia's office, she feels a mixture of anxiety about the imminent confrontation and profound relief that the 5-year performance is finally coming to an end, and real life can begin again, even if the start is through an explosion that will vaporize the world she knows. Dr. Patricia and Mariana decide that the timing of the revelation needs to be strategic to maximize impact and minimize Raphael's chance of hiding assets or preparing a defense. They choose to make their move in a specific week when Mariana knows, through the secret calendar she monitors, that Raphael will be divided between an important work event where he will present to potential investors and the 7th birthday of Pedro, his eldest son, with Julia. The timing will force Raphael to make choices under extreme pressure while simultaneously dealing with the implosion of both his parallel lives. The plan is to serve Raphael with the divorce papers and criminal complaint on Friday morning at his office, in front of his partners. The deliberate choice of a public location instead of a private one is for maximum humiliation and to ensure he cannot react violently or try to intimidate Mariana, who will be safely away from the scene. Simultaneously, a second process server will go to Julia's house in Campinas to deliver a copy of the same documents to her, revealing for the first time that Raphael is legally married to another woman and has maintained both relationships through systematic lies. The coordination will ensure that both women receive the complete truth simultaneously, with no chance for Raphael to control the narrative or manipulate either of them with an edited version of events. In the days leading up to the plan's execution, Mariana moves through her normal routine with an Emmy-worthy performance of domestic normality. She prepares Raphael's favorite dinners, watches TV shows with him, and even initiates sex one night because she wants the week to seem as normal as possible, so the shock is maximal when the truth explodes. During these final interactions, Mariana studies Raphael with almost scientific fascination, trying to understand how his mind works, how he manages to look her in the eye and lie about loving her while maintaining a complete family in a neighboring city, how he compartmentalizes 2 lives so completely that he shows no visible stress or internal conflict. She concludes that Raphael is either a genuine sociopath incapable of real empathy or a master of self-deception who truly believes his own justifications and rationalizations. On Thursday night, before the Friday when everything will explode, Raphael casually mentions that he has an important investor presentation the next day and will be inaccessible for most of the day. Mariana smiles sweetly and says she understands and will prepare a special celebratory dinner when he returns, assuming the presentation goes well. The irony of her knowing he will not return for that dinner, because when the presentation is over, his life will have been completely demolished, is not lost on her but is clearly lost on him, who accepts her comfortable lie as easily as she accepted his lies for so many years. On Friday morning, Mariana wakes up at 5 as always, But this time there is a palpable difference in how she feels. There are nervous butterflies of anxiety, but also a strange lightness, as if the weight she carried for 5 years is finally being lifted, even if the removal process will be painful. She prepares Raphael's breakfast for the last time and watches him eat and check emails, completely unaware that in 3 hours his life will implode in ways he cannot predict. When Raphael leaves for the office at 7, Mariana waits 15 minutes and then calls Dr. Patricia, confirming she is ready to proceed. Dr. Patricia coordinates with the process server, who arrives at the corporate building where Raphael's company is located at exactly 10 a.m. The time is chosen because Mariana knows Raphael will be in the middle of final preparations for his 11 o'clock presentation, so he will be surrounded by colleagues and partners when he receives the papers, making the moment maximally humiliating and impossible to hide. The process server enters the reception and asks to see Rafael Santos. The receptionist calls his assistant, who says he is in a preparatory meeting but can interrupt if it's urgent. The server says it is time-sensitive, so the assistant reluctantly goes to the conference room where Raphael is reviewing presentation slides with 3 senior partners. What happens next is documented both by the process server in his report and by a junior partner who was present and later told the version to multiple people, which spread throughout their industry. The server enters the conference room and asks which one is Rafael Santos. When Raphael identifies himself with a confused expression, the server hands him a thick envelope saying, "You are being served with a divorce petition and criminal complaint." Raphael takes the envelope, still not fully comprehending what is happening. He opens it and begins to read the first page, which is the divorce petition based on extreme infidelity, financial fraud, and bigamy. He turns pale and looks at the server, stammering that there must be a mistake, but then continues reading and sees his own name, Mariana's name, and shockingly, the name of Julia Cardoso, and the children Pedro and Sofia all listed on the official legal document. The 3 partners in the room are observing the growing confusion and starting to read over Raphael's shoulder. One of them, a senior partner named Dr. Mauricio, exclaims, "Raphael, what the hell is this? You have a second family? Is this true?" Raphael tries to answer, but the words don't come out coherently because he is in such deep shock that he can't even process fast enough to fabricate a plausible lie. He flips through the pages of the document, seeing evidence after evidence of his parallel life, including photos of him with Julia and the children, credit card statements showing purchases in Campinas, transcripts of his messages to Julia saying he loves her, and then on the last page he sees something that makes his heart completely stop. There is a handwritten note from Mariana that says, "I knew for 5 years, Raphael. 5 years you deceived me while I documented every lie. Enjoy your presentation today because it will be your last as a partner of this company or as a free man." Raphael falls heavily into a chair, the envelope escaping his trembling hands and the papers scattering across the conference table where the partners can see everything. Dr. Mauricio picks up some papers and begins to read with a look of growing horror. "Raphael, this is saying you committed bigamy, that you maintained 2 separate families for years, that you used company funds to support an unauthorized family. My God, this is going to destroy our reputation if it goes public, and based on the extent of this documentation, this is definitely going public." Raphael finally finds his voice, but it sounds weak and desperate. "I can explain. It's not what it looks like. Mariana is exaggerating. We can resolve this discreetly." But even as he speaks, he knows the words are useless because the evidence is obviously extensive and irrefutable. And most devastating is the gradual realization hitting him that Mariana knew for 5 years. 5 years where she smiled and cooked and performed as the perfect wife while secretly gathering everything necessary to completely destroy him. She was not the naive victim he thought, but a patient, strategic adversary who played the long game much better than he ever could. Meanwhile, in Campinas, A different process server knocks on Julia's apartment door at exactly 10:05. Julia opens the door with 3-year-old Sophia clinging to her leg and 7-year-old Pedro running in the background watching cartoons. The server asks if she is Julia Cardoso, and when she confirms, he hands her an identical envelope to the one Rafael received. Julia opens it, confused, asking what it is, and the server replies, "Legal documents related to Rafael Santos." She reads the first page, and confusion turns to shock when she sees that it is a divorce petition, not hers, but from a woman named Mariana Santos, whom she had never heard of, except for Rafael vaguely mentioning years ago that he had a technical wife for legal reasons that he said meant nothing and would end soon. But as Julia reads more, she realizes that it was not a technical, meaningless marriage, but a real one, complete with a shared life, while Rafael maintained a separate relationship with her, essentially revealing that she, Julia, was the mistress, not the primary partner as she had always believed. Worse yet, there are photos attached of Rafael with Mariana at social events looking happy and connected. Photos of the beautiful house where they live, which is much larger than the modest apartment where Julia raises her children essentially alone, except for Rafael's occasional visits, which she now realizes were visits from a man dividing time between two families, not visits from a committed husband working away. Julia feels her legs grow weak and sits heavily on the sofa. The children notice that something is wrong, and Pedro asks, "Mommy, are you okay?" She can barely answer because she is reading a document that details years of systematic lies where Rafael managed 2 complete relationships, making each woman believe she was the priority when in reality both were just pieces in a complex logistical management game. There is also a note at the end of the document from Mariana addressed specifically to Julia that says, "You deserve to know the truth. He deceived both of us, although in different ways. You have children with him, so your situation is more complicated than mine. But at least now you know the real character of the man you call your partner. I advise you to consult a lawyer immediately because he will try to control the narrative and minimize his responsibility." Julia picks up the phone with trembling hands and calls Rafael, but it goes straight to voicemail. She tries again and again, but he has apparently turned off his phone or is ignoring her calls. She sends a desperate text message. "What the hell is going on? I received legal documents saying you are married to another woman. Call me immediately." But there is no response, and Julia sits in her apartment with 2 small children, realizing that the entire life she built around Rafael was based on a foundation of lies so extensive that she doesn't know which parts, if any, were real. Back in Rafael's office, chaos is unfolding rapidly in ways he cannot control. Dr. Mauricio grabbed the phone and is calling the company's corporate lawyer because he immediately realizes that the legal implications of Rafael's actions extend beyond personal drama and potentially expose the company to litigation and reputational damage. The other partners are reading through the documents Rafael dropped, and their expressions range from horror to revulsion to anger, because even without knowing the full details, it is clear that Rafael used corporate resources and company time to support a secret family he hid from everyone for years. Rafael tries to snatch the documents from the partners' hands, but Dr. Mauricio physically stops him. "No, Rafael, you are not hiding anything else. Let us see the full extent of what you have done so we can determine the damage to the company and how we legally protect ourselves from your actions." Rafael realizes with a sinking feeling in his stomach that he is not just losing his marriage and potentially facing criminal charges, but also likely losing the career and professional reputation that took a decade to build. The investor presentation that was scheduled for 11 o'clock is obviously canceled. Dr. Mauricio makes a quick call to his assistant, instructing him to invent an excuse about a family medical emergency and reschedule for the following week. Although based on the severity of Raphael's situation, it is unlikely he will still be with the company next week to present anything. The partners move the meeting to a private conference room and close the door. They sit Raphael down, who appears to be in a state of dissociative shock, and begin the interrogation. How much company money did you divert to support an unauthorized family? Did you use a corporate card for personal expenses? Did you lie about business trips when you were actually with another woman? Did you put the company at legal risk by committing bigamy while being a visible partner representing our brand? Raphael tries to answer, but the words come out weak and defensive. He admits he used some corporate funds, but insists he always reimbursed them, though he has no documentation to prove it. He says the trips were a mix of real business and personal visits, but that he never let work suffer, although the evidence suggests otherwise considering the amount of time he spent managing two parallel lives. Dr. Mauricio is relentless. Raphael, based on what I am seeing in these documents, you have two options. You voluntarily resign today, effective immediately, and we buy your shares at the minimum value stipulated in our operating agreement, or we fire you for cause due to misconduct and fraud, which means you lose everything without compensation, and we sue you to recover diverted funds. You have 10 minutes to decide. Raphael looks around the room desperately, searching for empathy or an ally, but finds only the hard faces of men who feel betrayed not just professionally, but personally, because they considered Raphael a friend and trusted him with their collective reputation. Raphael eventually muters that he will resign because he has no real choice, and within 20 minutes he is signing papers that effectively end his career at the company he helped build for 10 years. He will receive a minimum payment for his shares based on the lowest valuation permitted in the contract, an amount that seems generous in absolute numbers, but is a fraction of what it would be worth if he maintained the shares and the company grew as projected. After signing the resignation, Raphael finally calls Mariana from the office phone since his cell phone is exploding with calls from Julia, whom he is too terrified to answer. When Mariana answers, her voice is calm and almost pleasantly professional. Hello, Raphael. I imagine you received my presents this morning. Raphael explodes. Mariana, what have you done? You served me at the office in front of the partners. You've just destroyed my career. How could you do this after everything we built together? Mariana laughs, a genuinely amused sound. After everything we built? You mean everything you destroyed through years of lies and betrayal? And as for your career, you destroyed that yourself the moment you decided to commit bigamy and divert matrimonial funds to support a secret family. I merely documented and exposed what you did. Raphael tries a different approach, his voice becoming pleading. Mariana, can we talk about this personally? I'm sure there are misunderstandings. We can resolve this without destroying everything. Mariana's reply is cutting. There are no misunderstandings, Raphael. I have 5 years of extensive documentation proving exactly what you did, and there is nothing to resolve except the division of assets, which will be done through lawyers, not through negotiation between us. By the way, I assume you've already discovered that I technically own 49% of the company you thought was yours through the restructuring you signed 2 years ago, so the resignation you just signed gives me effective control over your shares, which will be sold at a value I determine, not you. Raphael feels another wave of shock. Wait, that restructuring, you planned that? You were preparing for this years ago? Mariana confirms. Yes, Raphael. I knew about Julia and the children for 5 whole years, and I spent every day of those 5 years building a case against you while you thought you were too clever to be caught. You completely underestimated your wife, and now you are paying the price for your arrogance. Raphael tries one more time. What about Julia and the children? Don't you care that you are destroying their family too? The children are innocent in this." Mariana's voice grows even colder. "Julia and the children are your victims, not mine. You chose to create a family with her while married to me. You lied to both of us for years. And yes, the children are innocent. But that doesn't change the fact that you committed multiple crimes, including bigamy, which carries up to 6 years in prison in Brazil. And believe me when I say I will press for maximum charges unless you cooperate completely with the divorce and asset division on the terms I dictate." Raphael realizes he has no leverage whatsoever. "What exactly do you want?" Mariana outlines the terms. "I want the house. I want all the investments in joint accounts. I want your share of the company sold to me for the minimum allowed value, which effectively gives me total control, and I want you to agree to everything without contesting or dragging out the process. In exchange, I will not press criminal charges for bigamy, which would completely destroy you. The deal expires in 24 hours, so I suggest you consult a lawyer quickly." Raphael hangs up, feeling nauseous. He has gone from confident and in control to completely powerless in a matter of hours, and the worst part is the growing realization that Mariana orchestrated this with surgical precision over the years, while he was oblivious to the storm building around him. He finally listens to Julia's voicemail. There are dozens of progressively more hysterical messages demanding explanations. The last one simply says, "If you don't call in the next hour, I'm going to assume everything in the documents is true and consult a lawyer about alimony and custody." Raphael realizes he needs to deal with Julia but has no energy or strategy left for more lies. So he does something he has never done before. He decides to tell the complete truth to both women and accept the consequences because maintaining the lie has become impossible now that Mariana has exposed everything so completely. Raphael collects his personal belongings from the office under the stares of former colleagues who have already heard rumors about what happened. He walks to his car in the parking lot, feeling judging eyes on his back, and drives to the house he shares with Mariana. But when he arrives, he finds the locks changed and a note on the door saying his belongings will be delivered to a hotel where Dr. Patricia reserved a room in his name. He no longer has access to his own house, and realizes that Mariana planned even this detail, ensuring he couldn't return to confront her personally or potentially intimidate her. Raphael then drives to Campinas to face Julia. The 40-minute drive that he normally makes easily feels like a march to his own execution. When he arrives and knocks on the door, Julia opens it with eyes red from crying and an expression of anger and betrayal he has never seen on her face. She screams, "5 years, Raphael. You were married for 8 years out of the 10 we've been together. I built an entire life around you while you had a legitimate wife in Sao Paulo. How could you do this to me, to our children?" Raphael has no adequate defense. "It was complicated. I started a relationship with you before I met Mariana, but when I met her, I couldn't let her go, and then things just continued, and it got harder to leave the more time passed. I love both of you in different ways." Julia slams the door in his face. "You don't love anyone but yourself. Get off my property and don't come back unless it's to get your things. My lawyer will be in touch about child support and custody arrangements." Raphael stands there in the hallway for a moment before stumbling back to his car, realizing he has lost literally everything in the span of 12 hours. The 2 relationships that defined his life, the career that was his identity, the reputation that took a decade to build, all vaporized because he underestimated the woman he thought was a complacent, ignorant wife, but who was actually a patient strategist playing a much longer, smarter game than he was capable of comprehending. In the days following the initial implosion of Raphael's life, the story begins to leak through professional and social media networks in ways that amplify his humiliation exponentially. First, it's the colleagues who start whispering in the offices about why Raphael suddenly disappeared. Then it's his ex-assistant who tells a friend who tells her network. Within a week, the story of the businessman who maintained two secret families for almost a decade is circulating through their entire social circles. Mariana's friends, whom she strategically informed about the situation through carefully worded messages that paint her as a brave victim who discovered betrayal and acted decisively, begin to express public support through vague social media posts about finding out who is truly on your side when the truth emerges. Each post generates speculative comments, and eventually someone names Raphael directly, leading to the full exposure of his situation to their online community. Raphael's mother, whom Mariana strategically informed personally the day after serving the papers, is devastated not just by the betrayal, but by the years of lies her son maintained, including two grandchildren she didn't know existed. She calls Raphael, crying, demanding an explanation, but also expressing deep disappointment in the man she raised. "Your father would be ashamed, Raphael. We taught you better values than this. How could you look me in the eye at family dinners and lie for years about having an entire other family? And those children, my grandchildren I never knew? You stole that from me as much as you stole it from Mariana." His mother's disappointment hits Raphael in ways that other consequences don't, because it represents a fundamental moral failure, not just a strategic one. Raphael's close friends quickly begin to distance themselves when the full story emerges. Men who used to play soccer with him on Saturdays and drink beer complaining about their wives suddenly stop responding to his messages because association with him has become a social liability, and because many of them have wives who now see Raphael as an existential threat, representing every marriage's nightmare where the trustworthy husband reveals himself to be a systematic liar. There is also an element of fear among the male friends that their own wives might start questioning their behaviors if they continue associating with a man who exemplifies such elaborate betrayal. The public exposure peaks when a local gossip blog that covers business elite scandals picks up the story and publishes a detailed article titled, "Successful Businessman Maintained Two Families for Years, Deceived Wife Planned Revenge for 5 Years." The article includes enough detail to identify Raphael without explicitly naming him due to legal concerns, but everyone in their circles knows exactly who they are talking about. Comments on the article range from support for Mariana, "This woman is a queen. She waited and planned and destroyed him perfectly," to judgment of Raphael. "What kind of monster deceives two women and innocent children for years?" To a few confused defenders saying, "There must be more to the story. No one maintains a facade like that for so long without reasons." The article is shared thousands of times and generates heated discussions in online forums about relationship ethics, bigamy, and whether Mariana's revenge was justified or excessively cruel, considering it also hurt innocent children by exposing their father's lies. Julia is also dealing with her own set of social and emotional consequences. She had a life built in Campinas with friends and a community who all knew Raphael as her dedicated partner and a present father. Now she has to explain to neighbors and the children's school friends that the man they thought was her husband was actually a bigamist with a legal wife in another city. The humiliation is deep and multifaceted, because Julia is not just a victim of Raphael's deceit, but also appears on some level as an accomplice who should have questioned more why their relationship never became official or why he was absent so many days a week. Julia's friends are divided between those who offer genuine support, recognizing that she was manipulated as much as Mariana, and those who whisper judgments about how she didn't notice the obvious signs or why she accepted the unconventional arrangement for so long. There is also cruel speculation that Julia knew more than she admits and was willing to share her man as long as she received financial support and periodic attention from him. Raphael's children with Julia, 7-year-old Pedro and 3-year-old Sofia, are processing the situation at levels appropriate for their development but still painful. Pedro asks confused questions about why Daddy doesn't come home anymore and why Mommy cries so much, and Julia tries to explain in terms a 7-year-old can understand that daddy made bad choices and that their family needs time to figure out a new configuration. But Pedro is not stupid and realizes that something fundamental has broken in a way that cannot be easily fixed. Sophia, at 3, is too young to fully understand, but senses the tension and instability and manifests it through behavioral regression, reverting to wetting the bed and having nightmares and becoming clingy with Julia in ways she hadn't for a year. Raphael tries to maintain contact with the children, but Julia is making it difficult, not legally yet, but emotionally. She allows supervised visits, but the atmosphere is cold and tense, and the children sense the change in how their mother treats their father and become confused and split their loyalty between conflicting parents. Raphael also discovers through his own desperate investigation the extent of how much Mariana knew and for how long. He hires a divorce lawyer who reviews the evidence Mariana presented and is shocked by the volume and detail. Raphael, she has literally thousands of hours of surveillance, audio recordings of your conversations with Julia, GPS tracking showing every time you went to Campinas when you said you were somewhere else, financial transactions documenting every real you spent on your secret family. This is the most meticulously documented case I have ever seen, and frankly, you have no defense. The only strategy is to negotiate the best possible terms before she presses criminal charges that would put you in prison for years. Raphael's lawyer explains the brutal legal realities. Bigamy in Brazil is punishable by 2 to 6 years in prison. Dissipation of marital assets, where Raphael used marital money to benefit a third relationship, means Mariana is entitled not only to half the assets, but potentially compensation for diverted funds. And the fact that Mariana owns 49% of the company through a legal structure Raphael signed years ago effectively gives her control over his biggest asset. You need to accept the terms she offered. Give the house, the investments, company control, because the alternative is years of expensive litigation that you will likely lose anyway, plus possible prison time. And frankly, considering the extent of her documentation, any judge will be sympathetic to her and hostile to you. Raphael also discovers that Mariana strategically moved money over the years that he didn't track. She built her own business generating 40,000 reais monthly that is completely in her name and not subject to asset division. She has savings of over 500,000 reais in a separate account that she can prove came from her own earnings, not marital funds. She structured her finances so that when the divorce finalizes, she will walk away not only with the marital assets she can claim, but with a financial empire of her own that she built while he was unaware. The contrast is devastating. Raphael, who thought he was a master manipulator managing 2 lives, discovers he was being completely outmaneuvered by the wife he underestimated as a simple housewife with no financial sophistication. She not only discovered his secret, but used the years to build a fortress around herself while meticulously documenting his every crime and positioning herself for total victory when she finally revealed her knowledge. Raphael also has to deal with professional consequences that extend beyond losing his position at his own company. When news of the scandal circulates, other business contacts and potential employers view him as a reputational liability. Positions he could easily secure based on his experience and network suddenly vanish when recruiters discover his bigamy and fraud through basic internet searches. He painfully discovers that reputation takes decades to build, but seconds to destroy, and years to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all after such a fundamental and public breach of trust. Raphael tries to set up informational interviews with old connections, but the conversations are awkward and end quickly when the topic of why he left his own company inevitably arises. No one wants to hire a man who committed such blatant moral and legal crimes, regardless of how technically qualified he is for the positions. There are also immediate financial consequences that Raphael did not fully anticipate. He lost his income from the company, is paying for an expensive hotel because he no longer has access to his own home, is facing massive legal fees both for his divorce lawyer and eventually a criminal lawyer if Mariana presses charges, and still has financial obligations to Julia and the children that her lawyer is now formalizing through a child support process that will extract a significant percentage of any future income. Raphael does the calculations one night, drunk in his hotel room, and realizes that even if he gets a decent job quickly, between child support, legal fees, and the loss of assets to Mariana, he will be financially destroyed for years, probably decades. The man who had a net worth of several million 2 months ago now faces the real possibility of bankruptcy. Raphael's mental health also deteriorates rapidly under the pressure of multiple simultaneous crises. He starts drinking more heavily than ever, wakes up with brutal hangovers, but continues drinking at night because it is the only way he can silence the thoughts about how much he has destroyed. He has recurring nightmares where Mariana is laughing at him, or where both Julia and Mariana confront him simultaneously in public while everyone he knows watches. He avoids going out in public because he fears running into people who know his story and judge him with cold stares and whispered comments. Raphael has also developed obsessive patterns of reviewing everything that happened, trying to pinpoint the exact moment Mariana discovered the truth and started planning against him. He watches old memories, trying to detect signs that she knew that he missed. He relives conversations, searching for double meanings or ironies that slipped by. And the mental torture of knowing that she knew for 5 entire years while he continued to be confident in his own lies is almost worse than losing everything because it represents a fundamental violation of how he understood reality and his own capabilities. But the worst moments for Raphael are when he is alone at night in the generic hotel room and has to confront the question he avoided answering honestly. Why did he do it? Why did he keep 2 families instead of choosing one? What was he gaining from the elaborate charade besides the ego satisfaction of having 2 relationships where he was the center? Raphael tries several justifications to himself. He genuinely loved both women in different ways. He didn't want to hurt anyone by ending a relationship. He got stuck in a situation that grew beyond his control. But all the excuses sound hollow when forced to confront the deeper truth that he is fundamentally selfish and cowardly, who chose his own comfort and convenience over honesty and integrity, who preferred to keep both women in the dark rather than make a difficult choice and deal with the consequences like a responsible adult. And this realization of his own fundamental moral deficiency is perhaps the harshest punishment of all, because it cannot be attributed to Mariana or external circumstances. It is purely a reflection of who Raphael is at his core when all justifications are stripped away, and he is forced to see himself clearly for the first time in his adult life. After 2 weeks of living in hotel limbo and facing the brutal realities of a completely destroyed situation, Raphael finally agrees to meet with Mariana's lawyer, Dr. Patricia, to discuss the terms of his surrender, as it has become clear that there is no path to victory or even a draw in a legal battle against the documentation and strategic positioning Mariana built over 5 years. The meeting takes place in a high-rise law firm office downtown. Raphael arrives visibly diminished compared to the confident man he was a month ago. His suit is wrinkled because he hasn't been caring for his clothes properly. There are dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, and his hands tremble slightly from alcohol withdrawal or anxiety, or both. Dr. Patricia is professional but cold. She lays out the terms without preamble. Mr. Santos, my client Mariana is offering a resolution that avoids you facing criminal charges, which would result in 2 to 6 years in prison for bigamy. In exchange, you agree to the following asset: division. You transfer full ownership of the marital residence to Mariana, valued at 2.5 million reais. You transfer all investments in joint accounts totaling approximately 1,800,000 reais. You sell your shares in the company that you technically still own, but over which Mariana has effective control through the 49% structure you signed years ago. You sell those shares to her for the minimum value specified in the operating agreement, which is 300,000 reais, although the actual market value would be approximately 2 million. And you agree not to contest the divorce and accept full culpability based on adultery and fraud. Raphael listens to the terms, feeling every word like a physical punch. In total, he would be transferring approximately 5 million reais in assets to Mariana, while keeping essentially nothing except the 300,000 he will receive for the forcibly sold shares. An amount that seems significant in abstract but is a fraction of what their joint wealth is actually worth and will be quickly consumed by legal fees and living expenses. Raphael's lawyer attempts to negotiate. These terms are extremely punitive, essentially leaving my client with nothing while your client walks away with everything. Surely there is a more equitable middle ground. Dr. Patricia responds without emotion. Your client committed bigamy, which is a crime punishable by imprisonment. He defrauded marital assets for years, using my client's money to support an unauthorized relationship and a secret family. He systematically lied not just to his wife, but in tax statements and corporate documents. There is no middle ground here because your client has no negotiating position. The alternative to the offered terms is my client presses fully documented criminal charges and wins even more in civil litigation, while your client serves prison time and walks away with nothing anyway. So I suggest you accept the relative generosity of the current offer. Raphael finally speaks, his voice raspy. And if I agree to all this, Mariana really won't press criminal charges? How do I know I can trust her? Dr. Patricia slides a document across the table. Because unlike you, Mr. Santos, my client honors her word. This document is a binding agreement where Mariana agrees not to press criminal charges provided you fully comply with the terms and do not attempt to contest or delay the divorce in any way. You have 48 hours to sign, or the offer expires, and the criminal path proceeds. Raphael takes the document and reads through tears he can't fully control, years of his life reduced to cold, legal language detailing exactly how he will be stripped of everything he built, but he knows he has no real choice because prison would destroy him even more completely than financial ruin. For the next 2 hours, Raphael's lawyer and Dr. Patricia work through the implementation details. The timeline for property transfer, procedures for the corporate share sale, the division of minor personal items that have sentimental but not significant financial value, and every detail is another reminder of how much Mariana thought through every aspect of her destruction of his life. There is a particularly cruel clause that specifies Raphael cannot speak publicly about the case or the details of the agreement under penalty of breach, which would reactivate Mariana's option to press criminal charges, essentially silencing him from telling his side of the story or attempting to rehabilitate his reputation through public explanation. Mariana wants to ensure the narrative remains completely under her control, where she is the victim who triumphed and he is the villain who deserved punishment. When the meeting finally ends, Raphael signs the preliminary documents, agreeing to the terms and committing to finalize everything within 30 days. He leaves the law office feeling like a condemned man exiting the courtroom after his sentence has been read. Technically, he avoided prison but lost almost everything else, and he knows the coming years will be a struggle to rebuild his life from scratch at an age where most of his peers are consolidating their successes and planning comfortable retirements. Raphael returns to the hotel, and for the first time since everything exploded, he calls Mariana directly instead of through lawyers. When she answers, her voice is polite but distant. Hi, Raphael. I imagine you met with Patricia today. Raphael responds, Mariana, I need to understand, why did you wait 5 years? Why didn't you confront me when you found out? Why did you build this whole elaborate case instead of just leaving me? There is a long pause before Mariana responds, and when she speaks, her voice has real emotion for the first time. Because, Raphael, when I discovered what you were doing, my first reaction was to confront you immediately. But then I realized that if I did that, you would have had time to hide assets, fabricate excuses, potentially make me look crazy or paranoid. You had resources and connections that I didn't have, so immediate confrontation would have been a huge strategic mistake. So I decided that if you were going to treat me like an ignorant idiot for years, I would use that against you. I would let you continue underestimating me while I built the perfect case and financial positioning that would ensure that when I finally revealed my knowledge, I would hold all the power and you would have nowhere to run. Raphael insists. But 5 years, Mariana, 5 years of pretending, wasn't that torture for you too? Mariana laughs bitterly. Of course it was torture. Do you think it was easy to lie down next to you knowing you were going to another woman? To smile at you knowing every word from your mouth was a lie? To perform as the perfect wife when I wanted to scream the truth to everyone we knew? But I chose short-term torture to ensure long-term victory, and based on where we are now, I'd say it was worth every second of the performance. Raphael tries one last time to appeal to their history. There was real love between us once, wasn't there? In the beginning, before everything got so complicated, doesn't that count for anything? Mariana is implacable. Maybe there was something in the beginning, Raphael, but you destroyed that the moment you chose to deceive me. And frankly, I'm not sure what I felt was true love or just an illusion based on who I thought you were. The person I met didn't really exist. It was just a mask you wore well. The real you is a man who lied to 2 women for years and created children who will now suffer because of your selfishness and cowardice. So no, our history doesn't count for anything except as a lesson about what not to do in future relationships. Raphael tries once more. And did you never wonder if part of the blame is yours? If you had been a different kind of wife, maybe I wouldn't have needed to go somewhere else. Mariana's reply is cutting and final. No, Raphael. I do not take responsibility for your choices. You are an adult who decided to keep 2 families instead of being honest and choosing one. That is entirely on you, not on me. And the fact that you are still trying to deflect blame even now confirms that I made the right decision destroying you completely, because you clearly haven't learned anything. Now sign the papers, transfer the assets, and get out of my life permanently. There is nothing left to discuss. When the call ends, Raphael sits in the hotel room, realizing that there is no redemption or reconciliation possible. Mariana is gone permanently, not just legally, but emotionally. The woman he married 8 years ago has been replaced by this harder, more strategic version he helped create through years of her betrayal. And the irony that he occasionally complained that Mariana was boring or predictable, when in reality she was intelligent enough to fool him for 5 entire years, is not lost on him now. But it came too late to make a difference. 6 months after the initial implosion, the lives of everyone involved have settled into a new normal that is fundamentally different from what it was before. But at least it is no longer in the active chaos of revelation and immediate consequences. Mariana is prospering in ways that exceed even her own expectations. She sold the house she shared with Raphael because she didn't want to live in a space filled with false memories and bought a smaller, modern apartment better suited for her life now as a single, career-focused woman. Her consulting business has grown exponentially after her story went viral because other women want to work with someone who has demonstrated such impressive strategic intelligence and strength. She is now generating over 100,000 RIAs monthly and has hired a small team to help manage the increasing demand. Mariana has also unintentionally become a symbol of female empowerment and justified revenge. She is invited to give talks on financial independence and relationship strategy. Feminist blogs write articles celebrating her as a modern heroine who refused to be a passive victim but took control of her narrative and destroyed the man who tried to destroy her through systematic betrayal. There is even a podcast proposal wanting to interview her about the experience, although lawyers recommend not discussing it publicly due to the terms of the divorce agreement, but the attention is validating in ways Mariana did not anticipate. Most importantly, Mariana is in regular therapy, working through the trauma of having lived a lie for years and of having performed the role of the ignorant wife while internally tracking every betrayal. The therapist helps her process the anger and sadness that were buried during years of performance and find a path to eventual forgiveness, not of Raphael, but of herself for the years invested in a relationship based on a rotten foundation. It is difficult but necessary emotional work that allows Mariana to eventually open up to the possibility of trusting and loving again when she is ready. Raphael, on the other hand, is struggling to live through the predictable but no less brutal realities. He eventually found a job in a much more junior position than he used to occupy, working for a corporate consultancy where no one knows his story directly, but some have certainly searched online and found the articles about the scandal. His salary is a fraction of what he used to earn and barely covers basic expenses after child support for Julia and continued legal fees. He lives in a small apartment in a neighborhood he would never have considered when he was successful. And every detail of his diminished life is a reminder of how much he lost. Raphael is also in therapy, but reluctantly and inconsistently. He goes when he can afford it, and when he can force himself to face the uncomfortable questions about why he made the choices he did. The therapist tries to help him understand the patterns of selfishness and avoidance that led to the bigamy and lies. But Raphael resists insights often because complete acceptance of his own culpability is too painful. It's easier to victimize himself, thinking that Mariana was excessively cruel or that circumstances conspired against him, than to accept that he alone destroyed two families through conscious choices made day after day for years. Raphael's relationship with Pedro and Sofia, his children with Julia, is damaged, but slowly mending through regular supervised visits that eventually became unsupervised when Julia decided that despite everything, Raphael is not a physical danger to the children and that they deserve to have a present father, even if that father is profoundly morally flawed. Pedro, at 8, now understands more about what happened and has anger and confusion that manifests in challenging behavior at home and school. He asks Raphael difficult questions during visits, such as, "Why did you lie to Mommy?" and "Do you still love Mommy?" And Raphael doesn't have good answers because complete honesty would be inappropriate for an 8-year-old, but lies would only perpetuate the patterns that led him here. Sofia, at 4, doesn't fully understand the details, but senses a fundamental shift in her family and clings to Raphael when he visits, as if fearing he might disappear if she lets go. It is heartbreaking in ways that make Raphael question whether it would be better for her if he simply left permanently instead of being an inconsistent presence that causes more confusion. Julia is also rebuilding, but from a completely shattered base, because she not only lost a partner but discovered that 10 years of her life were based on an illusion carefully maintained by a man she loved. She is in intensive therapy, working through the trauma of discovering that nothing was as she thought it was, and developing the capacity to trust her own judgment again after years of being so completely deceived. Julia is also focusing on providing for the children through her marketing job, which thankfully remained stable. Raphael's child support helps, but is not enough. So she works more hours than is ideal and constantly feels the guilt of a working mother divided between the economic and emotional needs of children who need her now more than ever during this period of adjustment and healing. There is also a strange dynamic emerging where Julia has developed grudging respect for Mariana, despite never having met her personally. Julia realizes that both were victims of Raphael in different ways, and that Mariana chose a path of empowerment and strategy, while Julia chose a path of passive acceptance and hope that the situation would eventually improve. Part of Julia wishes she had been more like Mariana and taken control instead of waiting years for the officialization of a relationship that never came. But she also recognizes that she had children with Raphael, which complicated her options in ways Mariana deliberately avoided. Raphael's mother is also processing the revelations and trying to maintain a relationship with her son while expressing deep disappointment in his choices. She has started a cautious relationship with Julia and the grandchildren she didn't know, Pedro and Sofia, because she wants to be present in their lives despite the horrible circumstances of how she learned about their existence. There is awkwardness in the first meetings, but also the genuine love of a grandmother meeting grandchildren and recognizing that children are not to blame for their father's sin. Raphael's mother also expressed to Mariana, through the lawyer's communication channel, that she deeply regrets the betrayal Mariana suffered and admires her strength, and Mariana responded graciously, saying she does not blame Raphael's mother for his actions, but appreciates the acknowledgement. 6 months after everything exploded, Mariana is casually dating someone new whom she met through business circles, a man named Carlos who works in tech and who knows her story, but is not intimidated by her strength and independence, but is actually admired for those qualities. It is early days still, but there is real potential to build something healthy based on honesty and mutual respect. And Mariana is cautious but open to the possibility of loving again, when 5 years of performance and the years of false marriage before that had made it difficult to imagine trusting anyone completely. Mariana also maintains the strong friendships she developed over the years and is building a rich social life, separate from any man. She learned painfully that an identity based on a relationship is vulnerable, so she is ensuring she has a complete and happy self, independently of relationship status. 1 year after the initial revelation that destroyed Raphael's life, there is one last face-to-face confrontation between him and Mariana that is necessary for both of them to achieve true closure and move on completely. The meeting takes place in a neutral cafe that neither of them typically frequents, chosen specifically because it holds no associated memories and is public enough to prevent an extreme emotional scene, but private enough for an honest conversation. Mariana arrives first and waits, drinking green tea and feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation because she hasn't seen Raphael in person since the day she served the papers a year ago, and she is unsure what to expect from a man who lost literally everything, partly because of her strategic planning over the years. When Raphael enters, he looks radically different from the confident, well-dressed man he used to be. He has lost weight in an unhealthy way. His hair is prematurely gray at the temples, and there is a weariness in his posture that suggests years of struggle concentrated into months. But there is also something different in his eyes, a humility or perhaps an acceptance that wasn't there before, when arrogance and self-deception protected him from facing uncomfortable truth. Raphael sits across from Mariana, and for a long moment neither speak. They just observe each other, trying to reconcile the people they are now with the people they used to be in a relationship that seems to have existed in a completely different life. Raphael finally speaks first. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know you have no obligation to give me this time, especially after everything." Mariana replies carefully. "I agreed because the therapist said closure is important for both of us, and because, frankly, I was curious about how you are after an entire year of dealing with the consequences of your own actions." Raphael laughs bitterly. "How I am? Well, let's see. I lost my career, my reputation, my house, most of my friendships. Half my children are growing up seeing me occasionally on awkward visits. The other half I'll never know because you made sure of that. I'm working a job that pays a fraction of what I used to earn and living in an apartment I used to drive past without a second glance. So I'm fantastic, Mariana. Absolutely on top of the world." Mariana doesn't allow herself to be provoked. "You lost those things, Raphael, but not because of me. It was because of the choices you made, maintaining 2 families through systematic lies for years. I simply documented and exposed what you were doing. You created your own destruction. I merely accelerated the timing and ensured you would face adequate consequences." Raphael nods reluctantly. "I know. Believe me, I've realized that through many sleepless nights and therapy sessions, where the therapist forces me to face exactly how selfish and cowardly I was. I know the fault is mine, but part of me still wonders if the punishment had to be so total. You could have confronted me when you found out and divorced normally. It would have had a similar result without the public humiliation and complete destruction of my reputation." Mariana leans forward. "And if I had confronted you immediately, you would have hidden assets, fabricated excuses, potentially manipulated me into accepting an inferior settlement. You would have used your resources and connections to minimize the consequences. So yes, Raphael, I chose the route that would ensure maximum impact and minimum chance for you to escape full accountability, and I don't regret that choice because you deserved every bit of the punishment you received for years of systematic deceit. Raphael hesitates before asking the question that clearly haunts him. When exactly did you find out? On what day did you find the evidence and decide to play this long game instead of confronting me? Mariana answers with a precision that suggests the date is permanently etched in her memory. Thursday, March 14th, 5 years ago. I found your second wallet in the suit jacket pocket you left for the dry cleaner. Inside were photos of Julia and the children, a credit card I didn't recognize, an address in Campinas, and in that moment, I literally felt the floor disappear beneath me because everything I thought I knew about our life together was revealed to be a lie. Raphael closes his eyes, absorbing this. 5 years. You knew for 5 entire years and never let it show once. How did you do that? How did you live with me, pretending normalcy, while knowing I was lying every single day? Mariana considers before answering honestly. It was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. There were literally hundreds of times where I almost slipped and revealed I knew. Nights when you came back from Campinas and I wanted to scream the truth. Mornings when you lied about where you had been and I had to physically bite my tongue not to confront you. Dinners with your family where your mother talked about wanting grandchildren and I knew she already had 2 you were hiding. Every moment was torture, but I kept going because I knew patience would ensure complete victory eventually. Raphael shakes his head in disbelief. And you never, not for a second, considered that perhaps there was greater complexity, that maybe I loved both of you in different ways, that the situation wasn't simply black and white, a villain deceiving innocent victim? Mariana's reply is sharp. No, Raphael. There is no complexity or nuance that justifies bigamy and years of systematic lies. You didn't truly love either of us because true love requires honesty and respect. And you demonstrated neither to me nor to Julia. You used us to fulfill different needs of yours without consideration of how your choices affected us. That's not complex love, that is pure selfishness. Raphael tries another angle. And you building a secret empire while I was oblivious, moving money, restructuring the company to give yourself control, wasn't that also a form of deceit and manipulation? Mariana gives a cold smile. The critical difference, Raphael, is that everything I did was in direct response to your deceit. I didn't initiate the cycle of lies, you did. I merely protected myself strategically when I discovered the extent of your betrayal. And everything I did was legal, unlike the bigamy you committed, which is a literal crime. So no, I do not accept any moral equivalence between my strategic self-preservation and your deliberate betrayal. There is a long silence where both process the conversation, and then Raphael asks something that is clearly at the heart of why he requested this meeting. Did you ever really love me? Or was everything always a cold transaction for you too? Mariana considers the question carefully because it deserves an honest answer. I loved who I thought you were in the early years before I discovered the truth. I loved the man who seemed to be building a life with me. But that man didn't truly exist. He was just a mask you wore well when you were with me. So when I found out about Julia and the children, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a revelation that the person I loved was fiction, and it's hard to continue loving fiction when you know the ugly reality behind it. So the love died quickly after the discovery, and was replaced by a cold determination to ensure you paid for destroying years of my life with lies. Raphael accepts this and makes a confession of his own. I never knew how to love properly, I think. My parents had a cold marriage where they stayed together out of obligation, not affection. So I never learned what a healthy relationship looked like. When I met Julia, she was comfortable and easy. When I met you, it was exciting and challenging. And instead of choosing, I selfishly wanted both, thinking I could manage it, and that no one would get hurt if I maintained consistent lies. It was a stupid delusion, but I honestly believed it at the time. Mariana listens, but doesn't soften. Your childhood and upbringing don't excuse adult choices, Raphael. Many people come from dysfunctional families and choose to be better, not perpetuate bad patterns. You chose the selfish path and now live with the consequences. It's that simple. Raphael then asks something that seems vulnerable and genuine. Do you think I can recover from this? Rebuild a life worth living? Or have you destroyed me so completely that the rest is just existence until eventual death? Mariana considers before answering, and there is a slight softening in her tone. Raphael, you are 42 years old, not 80. You potentially have decades to rebuild if you do the genuine work on yourself. Go to therapy, really and consistently, not just when convenient. Take full responsibility without excuses or deflection. Learn to be a better father to your children even in imperfect circumstances, and eventually perhaps find a healthy relationship based on complete honesty from the start. Your life isn't over. Just the specific life based on lies and undeserved privilege is over. What you build from here on out is entirely up to you, not me. The conversation continues for another hour, covering the final practical details of the divorce that is almost finalized, discussions about how each plans to move forward, and eventually something close to forgiveness, though not complete. Mariana doesn't forgive Raphael for the years of betrayal, but forgives herself for having been deceived and for the years spent in a false relationship. And she recognizes that the experience, though painful, made her stronger and wiser in ways that will benefit the rest of her life. Raphael is also not completely forgiven, but reaches an understanding that Mariana is not a cruel villain, but a woman who protected herself in the only way that would ensure justice in a system that often fails betrayed women. And he accepts that the consequences he faces are proportionate to the magnitude of his betrayal. When they finally stand up to leave, there is an awkward moment where neither knows whether to shake hands or hug or simply nod. Eventually, Mariana extends her hand, and Raphael shakes it, a simple physical touch that marks the formal end of the relationship that defined years of both their lives. Good luck, Raphael. I genuinely hope you find peace and become a better person than you were during our marriage, she says with a sincerity that surprises them both. Raphael responds with an emotional voice. Good luck to you too, Mariana. You deserve all the happiness you find and more. And despite everything, I'm grateful that you forced me to face the truth about myself, even if the process was brutal. I probably would have continued the destructive patterns indefinitely if you hadn't intervened so decisively. They part ways in the cafe parking lot, each walking toward different cars and different lives. And as they drive in opposite directions, there is a sense of final closure, not complete forgiveness or reconciliation, but an acceptance that the chapter is closed and new chapters can begin without the weight of an unresolved past dragging them down. 3 years after the initial revelation that detonated the lives of everyone involved, the situation has stabilized into a new normal that no one would have predicted, but that is sustainable in ways the old life based on lies never could be. Mariana, at 35, is prospering in every measurable aspect. Her business has grown into a respected consulting firm with 15 employees and annual revenue in the multi-millions. She is sought after as a speaker at conferences on female entrepreneurship and resilience, and she wrote a memoir titled The Long Game: How I Turned Betrayal into Triumph, which became a surprising bestseller, selling over 200,000 copies and generating national discussions about power dynamics in relationships and the importance of female financial independence. Mariana has also been in a serious relationship with Carlos for 2 years, a relationship that is radically different from the one she had with Raphael because it is based on complete transparency and honest communication. Carlos knows every detail of her story, including the years of performing as the ignorant wife and the meticulous planning of revenge, and instead of being intimidated or judgmental, he admires her strength and strategic intelligence. They now live together in a beautiful apartment they bought jointly and discuss marriage eventually, but without rush, because both understand the importance of building a solid foundation before formalizing a commitment. Mariana also maintains complete financial independence with separate accounts, in addition to a joint account for shared expenses, because she learned painfully that financial vulnerability can trap you in bad situations, and she always wants the option to leave if a relationship becomes unsustainable, though she doesn't anticipate that with Carlos, who has consistently proven to be a reliable partner. Rafael, at 45, is in a very different place, but has also found a certain peace through years of hard work on. He has remained in therapy consistently, working through the selfish patterns and tendencies toward self-deception that led to his destructive choices. His therapist helped him identify that much of his behavior stemmed from a deep fear of real commitment and genuine intimacy, which made him maintain multiple superficial relationships instead of one deep one. Recognizing the psychological roots doesn't excuse his actions, but allows Rafael to understand himself better and make different choices going forward. Rafael has also modestly rebuilt his career. He has worked his way back to a mid-level management position at a consulting firm, and although he will never reach the heights of when he was a partner in his own company, he has a respectable job that pays the bills and allows him to contribute adequately to child support. More importantly, he has developed a real work ethic based on earning his position through performance rather than assuming privilege based on who he knows or the surname he carries. Rafael's relationship with Pedro and Sofia, his children with Julia, has improved significantly over the years as he has demonstrated a consistent commitment to being present, not just physically but emotionally. Pedro, now 10, is in his own therapy, processing the trauma of discovering his father's lies, but has a cautiously positive relationship with Rafael, who has finally learned to be a real father instead of an occasional visitor who brings expensive gifts to compensate for his absence. Sofia, at 6, has fewer memories from before the revelation, so her relationship with Rafael is less burdened, although she occasionally asks questions about why Daddy doesn't live with them, which require careful explanations from Julia about the mistakes Daddy made. Rafael is not in a new relationship and is not seeking one. His therapist advised years of being single, focusing on personal growth before considering a new romantic commitment, and Rafael agreed because he recognizes that he needs to be a fundamentally different person before he can be an adequate partner for anyone. Julia, at 38, is also rebuilding her own life. She has remained single, focusing on raising Pedro and Sofia and advancing her career in marketing, where she was promoted to a senior management position that pays well enough to comfortably provide for her family without depending completely on Rafael's child support. She is in therapy, processing the years of having been deceived and developing the capacity to trust her own judgment again. It is a long process, but she is progressing and is open to the possibility of dating eventually when she feels ready, although she is cautious about letting any man meet her children until she is absolutely sure of his character. Julia has also developed a surprising respect for Mariana through occasional communications mediated by the children's therapists who work with both families. The two women never became friends exactly, but there is a mutual understanding that both were victims of Rafael's deceit and that there is no reason for animosity between them when the true culprit is the man who lied to both of them for years. The children from both relationships are being protected as much as possible from adult complexities while receiving age-appropriate truth about what happened and why the family structures changed so drastically. They have access to therapy and support, and the adults in their lives are committed to ensuring that the trauma of Rafael's discovery does not define their entire trajectory. It is continuous work, and there will be scars. But there is also hope that with adequate intervention and consistent love from imperfect but trying parents, they will grow up to be healthy adults capable of honest relationships. The story of Mariana and Rafael eventually becomes a kind of modern parable told in different circles to illustrate different points. For some, it is a story of justified female revenge, where a betrayed wife refuses to be a passive victim and destroys the man who tried to destroy her. For others, it is a cautionary tale about the dangers of compounded lies and how deceit always eventually collapses under its own weight. For still others, it is an examination of the complex morality of calculated revenge, versus immediate forgiveness, and whether the ends justify the means when the means include years of elaborate performance and the total destruction of another person's life. When Mariana is asked in interviews if she would do anything differently looking back, she consistently responds that she would not change the fundamental decision to gather evidence and position herself strategically before revealing her knowledge, because that approach ensured she maintained power and control over the narrative. But she admits there was an emotional cost to the 5 years of performance that she initially underestimated, and that her therapist helped her process afterward. I don't regret the choice, but I also don't romanticize the experience. It was difficult and painful and left scars, even as it also made me strong. Life is not a fairy tale where revenge is purely satisfying and without cost. It is complicated and messy, and you carry the decisions you make, even when they are the right decisions. Raphael, when asked what he learned through the experience, responds with a genuine humility he wouldn't have had years ago. I learned that lying requires more lies to sustain the first lies until you build a house of cards so elaborate that you no longer remember what is true. I learned that selfishness eventually destroys everything it builds because it is an unstable foundation. And most importantly, I learned that taking responsibility for mistakes instead of deflecting or fabricating excuses is the only path to real growth and eventual redemption, if redemption is possible. I don't know if I am redeemed, but I know I am a fundamentally different and hopefully better person than I was 5 years ago, when the life I built on lies finally collapsed in a way it deserved. The broader lessons of the story resonate beyond the individuals involved. For anyone in a relationship, there are reminders about the importance of complete honesty, not just because deceit is morally wrong, but because it is practically unsustainable and will eventually be exposed with devastating consequences. About the need for financial independence, especially for women, so they are never trapped in bad situations by economic dependency. About the value of strategic patience versus immediate emotional reaction when confronting betrayal or injustice, and about the complexity of justice and revenge and whether there is ever a scenario where the total destruction of another person's life is morally justified, even when that person committed horrible wrong. Years later, when the storm has calmed and lives have been rebuilt in new configurations, the question remains whether anyone involved is truly happy in the complete sense, or if everyone has simply made peace with the imperfect realities that resulted from choices made in moments of weakness or strength, depending on the perspective. Mariana built a successful life, but carries the knowledge that she spent 5 years in elaborate performance instead of living authentic. Raphael faces each day with the burden of having destroyed 2 families and created trauma for innocent children who will continue processing it for years. Julia raises her children alone, knowing that 10 years of her life were based on an elaborate lie. And the children grow up in broken families, trying to understand why their father made the choices he did. But there are also moments of grace and genuine growth among the group. Mariana learned a strength she didn't know she possessed and built an empire from the ashes of a failed marriage. Raphael confronted his own demons and is genuinely trying to be a better person, even if it came too late to undo the damage he caused. Julia developed an independence and confidence in her own judgment that she didn't have when she was under Raphael's. And the children are learning through the example of imperfect but trying adults that mistakes can be confronted and consequences can be faced, and life continues even after devastating trauma. And so we come to the end of this complex story of deceit and revenge, of lies that lasted for years, and the truth that destroyed everything when it finally emerged, of a wife who knew her husband's dirtiest secret and used that knowledge to orchestrate his complete downfall with a patience and precision that were simultaneously admirable and terrifying. Now we want to hear from you who stayed through this long and morally complicated journey. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much did this story resonate and make you feel something real about the complexity of relationships and justice? Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Share if you have ever experienced or know someone who experienced a similar discovery of betrayal and how they react. Discuss whether you believe Mariana made the right choice waiting 5 years and planning meticulous revenge, or if immediate confrontation would have been morally superior, even if strategically inferior. Debate whether Raphael deserved the total destruction he received, or if the punishment was excessive, considering it also hurt innocent children. And most importantly, tell us your own stories of navigating impossible situations where there were no perfectly right answers. If this story made you question your own relationships and the importance of honesty and independence, if it made you admire Mariana's strength or be horrified by her calculated cruelty, if it made you feel sorry for Raphael or satisfied to see him face deserved consequences, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the morally ambiguous depths of human behavior, where real people make imperfect choices with lasting consequences. And always remember the lesson. Lies, no matter how elaborate, eventually collapse under their own weight. Underestimating the intelligence and determination of the people you deceive is a fatal mistake that can lead to destruction far greater than the truth would ever cause. And that sometimes revenge is served not hot in the moment of discovery, but ice-cold after years of patient planning by someone you completely underestimated while they documented every mistake you made, thinking you were too clever to be caught. Thank you for watching until the end of this 8,000-word and over 60-minute story. Until the next story that will make you question everything you think you know about morality, justice, and the limits of what is acceptable to do to protect yourself from people who try to destroy you through systematic betrayal. And always remember, never underestimate the quiet wife, because she might be documenting your every lie, waiting for the perfect moment to completely destroy the world you built on deceit.